Yes, Old was based on a graphic novel, and yes, it might be one of the strangest adaptations I've ever seen. Now, to be super clear, I'm not saying I think Old is the worst movie that is an adaptation. That would probably be, we've had some really rough ones in the last few years.
God, I hate this planet.
And...
Really? A muffin.
And...
I can see the future.
And...
Right, well that's not going to work, is it?
And...
Yeah, I do.
And...
I'm way ahead of you. We're just gonna walk around looking for old men. I mean, how hard could that be?
And of course...
Father, when can I leave to be on my own?
And also...
Hello, Pops!
So yeah, all of those were worse movies than Old, except Madam Web, which I love.
So, you're welcome.
But what I believe makes Old so interesting is that when it comes to actual adaptation, how the work was translated from graphic novel to film, I think Old missed the mark more than any of these, and I will explain why. Also, before we start, this is going to sound like I'm beating up on M. Night Shyamalan. I get that, but don't misunderstand me. I respect the hell out of him, and I'd feel really bad if I left that out. M. Night is incredibly rare in this industry. He makes exactly the kind of movies he wants to. Some are great, some maybe not, but they're all his. He self-finances his movies now, so he doesn't need to answer to any studio head, and he understands how to make a movie for a reasonable budget. Since After Earth, he pretty much never makes a movie over $50 million, so even if they are not huge hits, they're profitable. And sometimes they are huge hits. Split had a budget of $9 million and made $278 million worldwide. There are very few filmmakers who can consistently make movies like that. I also like to listen to M. Night talk about the craft behind his movies because I think they're almost all incredibly well shot. And while the dialogue can sound bizarre, Night always manages to pull some memorable performance out of his actors. I enjoy about half of his movies. My favorites are Signs, Split, Sixth Sense, and Unbreakable. He's left an undeniable mark on the supernatural mystery thriller genre, and on top of all of that, he seems like a real nice guy, very chill, easy to work with. And as someone who lived in the area for a while, I especially love how much Night represents Philadelphia. Even Old, a movie that takes place on a remote tropical beach, manages to name-check Philly.
We're from Philadelphia.
And he films a lot of his movies in the area, so he keeps the Pennsylvania film scene going. I really do respect him. All that being said, Old is a weird movie and an even weirder adaptation. And we'll get to how, but first I want to nail down what an adaptation is and what separates a successful adaptation from an unsuccessful one. Very simply, an adaptation is a movie, television series, or stage play that has been adapted or drawn from a written work, usually a novel. In our case, Old is an adaptation of the graphic novel Sandcastle, which was written by Pierre Oscar Levy and drawn by Frederick Peters. Some adaptations are very direct translations of the text onto screen, others take many creative liberties, and that is the fun of an adaptation. How does the artist transform the original work to fit into a new medium? And as an audience member, does this movie work, and do the changes from the original make it a better or worse version of itself? And a lot of times that comes down to fidelity, preserving what people loved about the original work. After all, the original is usually beloved by some fan base, otherwise the studio probably wouldn't spend money adapting it. But we've all been there when, for whatever reason, the creatives adapting the work don't understand what makes it special and make changes that book fans know will sink the project. Artemis Fowl tumbles to mind as a recent low bar for adaptations because the filmmakers seem to fundamentally misunderstand what made the books work. A true anti-hero as opposed to a slightly jerky hero. Sanding down that edge made the movie into a generic mess, and fans of the book would say the film failed because it was adapted poorly. The fidelity of the original work was not preserved. When talking about an adaptation's fidelity, film theorist Robert Stamm described three essential aspects of an adaptation. You have the narrative, aesthetic, and thematic features. These are the three lenses through which all adaptations are judged. Very simply, did the same things happen? Did they look the same? And did it mean the same thing? Now that you know what to look for you to understand the issues with Old as an adaptation, I'm going to need to explain what happens in this movie. I usually try not to be too nitpicky in these, but I don't really have a choice here. Otherwise, as we start to figure out what's going on, it's going to sound like I made some stuff up, but this is actually what happens in the movie. Okay. So Old opens with the Kappas riding a bus through an exotic location. We've got Guy, played by Werewolf by Night's Gail Garcia Bernal, and Priska, played by Phantom Thread's Vicky Krieps. They've got two kids, played by, at this point, young actors. There is the 7-year-old Maddox, played by Billions' Alexa Swinton, and a 6-year-old Trent, played by Nolan River. Throughout the trip, all they talk about is time.
You have such a beautiful voice. I can't wait to hear it when you're older.
How old does a child have to be to do scuba diving?
I don't know, Trent. I think you're a bit too young.
You're a baby. You said 5 minutes. Technically, it's been way more than 5 minutes.
Stop wishing away this moment.
It sounds like these people were trying to get chosen for the old beach. They arrive at a resort and are greeted by the resort owner, played by Dr. Death's Gustav Hammerstein, and a character named Madrid, played by Queen of the Rings Francesca Eastwood, who gives the adults fancy cocktails. Then they go to their room so they can allude to their failing marriage and also, again, time.
You're always thinking about the future.
You're always thinking about the past. You work in a goddamn museum.
They're gonna love this beach. The kids meet some adults at the resort and another child who is Trent's age and happens to be the resort manager's nephew. He gives Trent a secret code. Cool. The Kappas go to a secluded beach. You need to go through a cave to get there, and when they arrive, they find a man played by Aaron Pierre, who has a name which we will get to. It's insane. The family has some beach fun as another family from the resort arrives. This one is led by Charles, played by Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter's Rufus Sewell. He is married to Crystal, played by Mad Max Fury Road's Abby Lee. You've also got their 6-year-old daughter named Kara, played by Kylie Begley, and Charles's mother Agnes, played by House of Cards Kathleen Chalfont, and a dog. And then some strange things start happening. The kids find random stuff from the hotel, but it's all rusted. While Trent is swimming, he happens upon a dead body. Everyone drags the body ashore and puts together that the mysterious man probably killed her, or at least has something to do with it because he's acting very cagey and also has a bloody nose. And listen, Charles has a trophy wife and a British accent and is rude, so clearly he's the bad guy, and there are lots of racial undertones in his accusation, but also, he's right. This guy seems super guilty. Who is this guy? Okay, so you know rappers. Let's name some. Kendrick Lamar, Tupac, 50 Cent, Biggie Smalls, Method Man, Eminem, The Game. Okay, so this guy is apparently a famous rapper, and his rap name is, and I'm not making this up, Mid-Sized Sedan, which, I don't know, man, feels like a joke from a brainstorming meeting that went way too far. He apparently also has a hit single called More Dough for the Cookin', which is so close to sounding like the name of a real song, but instead, it sounds like it was made up by an alien trying to blend in with people. So Mid-Sized Sedan explains that he was just here with the girl and she disappeared. We're joined by our last set of beach characters. It is a husband and wife named Jaren, played by Quills from X-Men 3, aka Ken Leung, and Patricia, played by Nikki Amuka Bird, who played Mrs. Steerforth in that David Copperfield movie. That's pretty good. Earlier, we also saw that Patricia has semi-frequent seizures that Jaren can handle with his nursely skills. Also, Crystal has a calcium deficiency. Also, Priska has a tumor or something. Try to guess how that one's gonna come up later. Good luck. Back at the beach, Agnes seems to have some sort of heart episode, but she's fine. So because of the dead body, Jaren attempts to leave the beach and get help, which becomes the first trip through the Cave of Migraines. And even though this wasn't a problem entering the beach, exiting the beach, this gives you a big headache, and apparently you black out and I guess waddle back to the beach. This happens a handful of times and explains why they don't all just leave. Also, their phones don't work. In the meantime, Priska tries to get Charles to examine her son, who seems to be growing, and she says she knows something is wrong and should be taken seriously because, and I swear this is true,
You don't know me. I curate exhibits for museums.
and I guess knows when things look different than they did before. I don't know. This is not the last time her museum curation skills will come up. Then Agnes dies. Now we're moving. Jaren and Patricia distract the kids, and we learn that Jaren is a nurse and Patricia is a psychologist because, and this has been established earlier, Trent always asks everyone their names and occupation, but when Jaren tries to guess the kid's age, something people I guess do, he is way off because the kids have visibly aged up and have been replaced with new actors. Maddox is now being played by Jojo Rabbit's Thomason McKenzie, Trent by Luca Faustino Rodriguez, and Kara by the Dropouts Michaela Fisher. In the confusion, Mid-Sized bolts, and Charles chases him because he thinks Mid-Sized killed that woman, and Charles now believes that caused his mother's death. They both get cave migraines and wake up back on the beach. Then Priska convinces everyone to break off into groups of 2 and try to exit through the caves. It doesn't work. Then, surprise, Charles cuts Mid-Sized Sedan out of nowhere, but then Mid-Sized heals really quick. Now I know what you're thinking, is this some sort of backdoor pilot for the Green Lantern show? And then you're thinking, wait, Green Lanterns can't heal themselves. And then you remember that in Green Lantern Volume 5, Issue 16, Baz uses the ring to get his brother-in-law out of a coma, which even surprises Budge, his more experienced Green Lantern friend. So the rings can do anything. thing. But this doesn't have anything to do with that. Healing quickly is also a beach thing. Also now Midsize realizes that he and the dead girl were both sick. Also, it's pretty much impossible to swim out because of the waves. But the healing thing becomes a problem because Priska's tumor that I mentioned earlier starts growing quickly, and the team decides they need to do something. Luckily, Charles is a surgeon and Jaren is a nurse, which feels like the kind of thing that, if there were some big twist, would be two people you would not want on this beach, but hey, what do I know? Anyway, they cut Priska open with a pocket knife, but then the wound immediately closes, so they all stick their dirty little hands into her body and hold the skin apart, and Charles takes out the tumor and Priska is fine. Also, during surgery, Charles kept randomly talking about a movie because he clearly has schizophrenia or something. Now Midsize goes to check on the dead girl, and it turns out she's all bones now. Priska uses her museum curation skills again.
I'm not a forensic pathologist, but from excavations for the museum, I know that it varies based on soil and temperature.
To figure out that a body would normally take 7 years to decompose this much, so they come up with the rules. You seem to age a year every half hour. The kids need to eat a lot because they're becoming larger, but the adults don't. They just get wrinkles. And it might be the rocks that are making everyone age, and that's why they can't leave. And then the kids bone. Specifically Trent, who is now played by Pig's Alex Wolff, and Kara, now played by Little Women's Eliza Scanlon. And technically there have been some suggestions that their brains are developing quickly too, but still, it's weird. No one knows they had sex because it's under a little towel fort, but everyone figures it out pretty quickly because Kara is immediately pregnant. She eats a ton of pasta, which the hotel brought to the resort, and the pasta did not decompose because it was in special bags, which means the bags can block the effects of the beach, but whatever, none of the characters ever realize this. So, Kara immediately gives birth and the baby dies. She sort of loses it because of this. Her mom, Crystal, also loses it. Also, Charles loses it and stabs Midsize Sedan to death. Big day for these guys. Also, if you're like, hey, why isn't Midsize Sedan healing, 10 minutes ago? Who the hell knows? Is it because the knife is rusty? Maybe, but probably not because that looks different. We'll get to it. Then they get serious about leaving. Jaren tries to swim away, even though he said that's not possible. Wonder how that's gonna go. Everyone else besides Charles, who is now muttering to himself over there, discuss climbing the rocks. And then we learn that everyone got invited to this beach through a sweepstakes on a pharmacy receipt, so this is probably a scheme because of their medical conditions. And the resort has their passports, so the resort can make it look like they never came here in the first place, which makes total sense if you ignore the fact that one member of the crew, Crystal, has been taking what would definitely be Instagram photos since they got to the resort. One member of the crew is a world-famous rapper, and everyone else probably told at least one person they were going here, so of course people would figure it out eventually, but hey, maybe the rocks are making everyone very dumb. And look, someone's watching them from a distance. It's their driver from earlier M. Night Shyamalan cameo. Priska talks to Maddox about the divorce and admits that she was having an affair because she thought she was dying from cancer, and when she was doing her job as a museum curator,
I stare at the remains of nameless people in glass cases, and I kept thinking I'm going to be one of those people. Does that make any sense?
Also, Jaren's back, but he's dead. And now Kara decides that she's gonna try to climb the rocks, which almost works until she falls and dies. Speaking of dies, Priska gets ready to use some up until now apparently secret pool noodles to swim away, but has a seizure and dies. Guy's eyesight starts to fade. Then Crystal comes back from wherever she was and looks older and has a hunch because she doesn't have her calcium. Priska loses some of her hearing, and then she apologizes to Guy for cheating on him. The kids, who are looking through some of the stuff they found earlier, find a book full of the names of other people, presumably people who were on the beach before them. Also, they read what must have been the original pitch for this movie. Then it's night, and Charles gets all stabby again, this time with more racism. But again, knives don't really do anything because they're all Wolverine. The kids go hide in a cave, but they run into Crystal, who thinks she's hideous and doesn't want the kids to look at her, so she tries to crush them with rocks. But, okay, I'm not going to show this part, but this happens. I'm just going to use the appropriate Futurama clip. Crystal drops the rock on herself and it breaks her arm, which heals quickly but wrong, and then this happens a bunch more and it looks hilarious, and then she dies.
My only regret is that I have bonitis.
And Priska uses a rusty knife to defend Guy from Charles, and because rust acts like a poison, Charles quickly decays. Then the Kappas have one last night together. Maddox sings, Dad loses his memory, then he dies, then Priska dies. It's the next morning. We get the last actor switch. Adult Trent is now played by Prometheus's Emin Elliott, and Maddox by Matilda's Embeth DeViets. They were probably somewhere in their 40s or 50s. Maddox asks if they should try to escape again, and Trent asks if she wants to build build a sandcastle. And while they're talking about still feeling like kids, Trent remembers a secret note that he got from the resort owner's kid, and they decode it. The note says that his uncle doesn't like the coral, and they realize that they could have swam through the coral and used it like some sort of rock-proof barrier this entire time. So they do that, but Maddox gets stuck, so they die. Blackout. Now, would you believe there's more movie? Because of course there is. We check back with M. Night, who confirms that everyone died, and then he goes back to the resort, and then walks through the kitchen, and then goes into a lab. And it turns out, big twist that the characters figured out about a half hour ago, the whole resort is a front for a pharmaceutical company. It turns out the company finds specific people with diseases they're looking to cure, and then offers them a trip to the resort using their pharmacy receipt. The scientists make a cocktail that contains the experimental medication for each guest's specific ailment and gives it to the guests when they arrive. And then they take the guests to the secret beach and monitor them. We learn that Patricia specifically was a success, and her medicine kept her from seizing for almost the entire day, meaning many years. Hooray! They cured epilepsy. Then, a mysterious person gives something to a cop from earlier, and a new family shows up at the resort. But as they're about to take their special drink medicine, a random passerby bumps into them and the drinks fall. But this is not just any random passerby, it's Trent and Maddox, and they explain that the resort is doing an ode to everyone at the same time as the cop calls in the missing people from the book Trent gave him. Then Trent goes to the resort manager's nephew and thanks him, as we see that Trent and Maddox did escape, and I guess M. Night just missed him. Then they fly away in a helicopter. The end. Also in the credits, the letters grow serifs, as if that's what a letter aging looks like. It's adorable. Over the credits, M. Night's daughter, you know the one from Trap, sings a song, even though apparently there is an actual version of the song, More Dough for the Cookin', recorded by Aaron Pierre. And while you can kind of hear it in one scene, it is not played over the credits, and that is Old's last mistake. So how does this differ from the source material? Well, I'm going to describe the plot of Sandcastle. Some of it will sound pretty familiar and some very different. I will say, this book is very French, and there are a lot of drawings of naked kids because that's how French kids go to the beach sometimes. It's a cultural thing, and then like with Old, there's a lot of weird sex stuff where, sure, two characters are old enough to be having sex, but they were preschoolers a few hours ago, and it's weird, but like in Old, the book hints that their brains also age at an accelerated rate, but it's still weird, so like, that happens. And I'm not making the case that everything in this book is cool and everybody should read it, but I do think it is interesting. But like, don't worry, I'm not going to show the weird stuff. But like, if you wanted to read this and you're like, whoa, yeah, it's French. Okay, so Sandcastle starts with some drawings of just the beach, or it's more of a lagoon or inlet, but still, eventually, someone who we will later learn is named Amesan, Amesan, wakes up from a nap and sees a young woman going for a swim. Then she dies and Amesan is bummed. And listen, the drawings in this book of Amesan and another character are a little rough, so not excusing it, just get used to that. A family shows up to the beach. This is pretty much the Kappas from Old, although their names here are different. The mom and dad are named Marianne and Robert, the kids are Felix and Zoe, and they have a dog named Elvis. And like in Old, these people talk about nothing but time. Specifically, Zoe swats at some ferns, and Robert says that there may not be any left when she's older, but Marianne chimes in that the ferns are going to be here long after they're gone. Family passes Amesan, gives him some weird looks. Robert thinks he's creepy. Marianne jokes that it's because Robert is racist. Also, Amesan has a nosebleed. Elvis finds the clothes from the young woman and a medallion featuring Our Lady of Guadalupe. This is not an important detail, but I figured it'd be weird if I left it out. Another family shows up. This one is led by Charles, like in the movie. He's married to Natalie, and they have a teenage daughter named Sophie and a younger son named Louis. They're sort of brats. There's also Natalie's mother, who I don't believe is ever named. They measure Louis's height on the sign to the beach, which would suggest that they come to this beach once a year. Sophie runs away from the family to listen to music and bumps into Amesan. Louis and the grandma go swimming. Robert and the kids are building sandcastles when he notices that their swimsuits are getting too tight. Marianne picks up Felix and also notices something strange. Amesan tells Sophie that he's a jeweler and something weird is going on right as Louis and grandma find the woman's body. Charles is a doctor, so he looks at it and declares that whoever this is died. He blames Amesan while also helping him with his nosebleed. Charles also calls the inspector and tells him to send someone over. Then Natalie tells Charles that her mom isn't doing great, and Marianne explains to Charles that her son is having some sort of weird growth spurt and his short split, so now the kids are naked. Ugh. Then the last group of beachgoers arrive. A writer named named Harry Lescaride was the only character to get a last name, and a couple named Oliver and Florence. Florence is Harry's daughter. They try to leave, but Charles won't let them because he's the worst. Then his mother-in-law dies, and Oliver and Florence take the kids to distract him. This is where we get the, "Hey, how old are you? Come on, don't lie." And then Marianne shows up looking for kids, not recognizing Felix and Zoe right in front of her. Charles tries to call the police again, but this time the number doesn't work. And then Amasan bolts but is caught by Charles. Oliver gets Charles to come back and look at the kids. Amasan tells everyone that he thinks there's some special power on this beach. Charles punches him. Then Sophie comes back older and Charles doesn't notice her. This is where everyone figures out what's going on. Part of this involves checking Louis for pubes. Zoe catches a peek and is interested. Then Louis and Zoe sneak away and have sex. Also, Sophie tries to sneak Amasan away because she thinks her dad will kill him. We learn that there's some sort of force field that keeps people on the beach, and Harry, who is a science fiction writer, gives us some theories. Maybe it's a group hallucination. Maybe it's an experimental drug. Maybe this is some kind of fountain of youth. Maybe it's a dream. Maybe it's a weird social experiment. Nobody buys any of it and doesn't really care. Louis and Zoe talk post-sex, and she says she may have done all this because she wished that she could grow up so that she could do whatever she wanted. Then they do more sex stuff and swim back to everyone else. Elvis the dog is dead. Bummer. Sophie and Amasan get to the top and can't escape. Sophie tells Amasan she wants to have sex. He originally protests and even mentions a wife in Algeria, which would suggest that even though he woke up on the beach, Amasan did not age until everyone got there. Then he and Sophie have sex. Louis and Zoe return to the group, and it turns out Zoe is pregnant. Felix thinks he sees someone in the bushes, but he can't find him. Then he goes to work on his sandcastle while his sister gives birth. Charles beats up Amasan, and then Harry knocks out Charles. Natalie suggests that Charles' behavior may have something to do with Alzheimer's. Charles starts building a sandcastle. Zoe has a baby girl and everyone is happy. Felix decides to ask Sophie if they can have sex since he's probably going to be dead soon. She's down with it. Then they have a party to celebrate the baby being born and also sort of a last meal. Sophie suggests to Amasan that they have an orgy later. Pretty sure this is a joke. Then everybody hears some gunfire and it turns out Jose is running towards the beach while being shot at. Who's Jose? We have not seen or heard of him yet, but Marianne says he's the hotelier's son, so I guess they know him, but he gets shot and killed before he can reach the beach. This never really goes anywhere. And now we're pretty much at the end. The sun sets. Charles is still making a big ugly sandcastle. Natalie tries to get his attention, but it doesn't work. She's sad. Everyone lays together. Harry dies. Felix asks Amasan what happens when they die, and Amasan tells everyone a story. It's about a king who was visited by the Grim Reaper, but was able to convince the Grim Reaper to let him live. They made a deal that the Grim Reaper would return somewhere in the next 7 years, when specifically is a secret to the king. And for 7 years, the king built a fortress to keep the Grim Reaper out. He turned away everyone who tried to enter, including his wife, daughter, and son, because he was suspicious they may be the Grim Reaper in disguise. Then, in the 7th year, the Grim Reaper came anyway, and the king felt like an idiot. Then he died. And then everyone goes to sleep. All the parents and kids die in their sleep, and the only one left in the morning is Zoe's daughter, who, alone, begins to build a sandcastle. And that's the end. That's the entire book, 100 or so pages. There is no explanation for what caused the aging, and we don't find out how the daughter's life went, although I'd have to guess bad. So now that you're sort of familiar with both stories, you can probably tell they're similar, but have some significant differences. Let's go over the big ones in order of appearance. To start, the book does not have any of the resort intro. It starts at the beach. The movie spends about 15 minutes setting up the families, their issues, and the resort itself. Also, the stranger in the book is some old Algerian man. In the movie, he's a famous American rapper. Charles's family is also different. Not only does he have a son as well as a daughter in the book, I also wouldn't describe his wife as the kind of trophy wife Charles has in the movie. Also, both main families have apparently been to the beach before. The only member of any family that has a disease we hear about is that Book Charles also has some neurological disorder, although it does not present the same way that movie Charles's schizophrenia does. None of that Marlon Brando movie stuff. Apparently that was added by M. Night because his real-life father had a similar disease and brought up that movie a bunch. Old also doesn't include Harry Lescarde, the other less cranky older man. In the movie, leaving the island through the caves gives you a headache that forces you back onto the beach. In the books, it's some sort of invisible force field, and also there are men with guns. Also, the movie doesn't do any of the theory crafting the book does, like bringing up the idea of a curse or a magic amulet or a wish. The characters pretty much figure out it's the rocks without really going through any other ideas besides the group psychosis idea, which is immediately rejected. Very important, in the movie there are a bunch of deaths before night. Besides the grandma whose heart gives out in both, mid-sized sedan is stabbed, Jaren drowns, Kara falls off the cliff, and Patricia has a seizure. None of that happens in the books. All of those characters survive until night. Also, the baby in the book survives. It grows up over the course of the book and is alone on the beach the next day. The main couple in the book does not mention anything about a divorce. That plotline was invented for the film. And then everything at night is different. Charles and Crystal don't go all slasher, the lack of light doesn't turn it into a horror movie, they all just go to sleep. Outside of a brief moment near the end of the movie, you don't really get any sandcastles. Charles obsessing over the sandcastle and the daughter making the sandcastle at the end of the book don't make it into the movie. That whole motif is more or less dropped. The sex is toned down significantly in the movie. You get a little between Trent and Kara, which, funny enough, is reversed in the book, where the daughter of the main family has the baby, but besides that, none of the other sexual interactions. The movie also does not have a bit where the hotelier's son tries to warn everyone, but is shot. Last thing on the beach. The story at the end of the book about the king trying to escape death does not make it into the movie at all. And then that's where the book ends. No siblings escaping the beach, no pharmaceutical twist, nothing at the resort. Those, I would say, are the differences that really matter because they highlight the biggest difference between the two stories. The movie is a horror movie, and the book really isn't. And that difference in tone informs what each story is trying to say. Which raises the question, what is Old trying to say? And there are a few themes that are present in the movie. Old is about the importance of family. Specifically, Old is about marriage. Guy and Priska are a couple at the end of what we see has been a broken and complicated marriage, and besides causing them a lot of stress, the breakup is affecting the kids in an unhealthy way. But when put through this test, their relationship is strengthened. They take care of one another as the day goes on and forgive each other for their past mistakes. And this idea is present in a fair amount of M. Night's work. It doesn't need to be marriage specifically, but a distant family relationship is tested and affirmed. That's Signs, Unbreakable, and The Happening. Old is also sort of about racism being bad. Charles, the closest thing the movie has to a traditional bad guy before the twist, is racist, although like I said earlier, his suspicions aren't unreasonable. But Charles, A, feels like the kind of character who would be racist because he's also displaying other bad behavior like being controlling or having a young wife. B, is a little too quick to completely blame Mid-Size Sedan. Mid-Size Sedan is a prime suspect, but that doesn't mean he did it. And then C, stabs him. Anyway, I wouldn't say this theme is really followed up on in a meaningful way, but this does show up early in the narrative and is used to set up Charles as the villain. But I would say the big idea of Old is real simple. Getting old is scary. And I think, in the big picture, solid premise. Because getting old is scary for many reasons. First, you've got the existential fear of death, being closer to the end than the beginning. And the complaint that is happening too quickly is one almost everyone seems to make eventually. So the fear of dying. But Old also takes aspects of aging and turns them into body horror. A bone breaks and heals. A parent quickly loses their sight. A tumor grows uncontrollably in seconds. And I think this environment is an interesting way to play with that idea. Speeding up normal processes highlights what's strange about a body changing under quote-unquote normal circumstances. And no scene captures it better than Kara's pregnancy. Because pregnancy, while natural and beautiful and important, is also pretty grim when you separate the process from the result. It's painful, bloody, and the mother has very little control over it. And if it happens very quickly, it stops seeming normal and starts to resemble one of the most famous horror movie scenes of all time. Many scenes in horror movies touch the same nerve as Old. The poltergeist scene where Dad looks in the mirror and sees his face deteriorate. The scene in The Shining where Jack loses his mind and starts attacking his family. They are all at least inspired by the idea of or the consequences of aging. And throughout the movie, characters share their opinions about why growing old isn't great. We hear warnings like, don't grow up too soon throughout the opening. On the beach, we see the juxtaposition of carefree children and burdened adults. Crystal is worried about showing the natural effects of aging before they make it to the beach. This movie is not very subtle. What I think is so fascinating about Old is the resolution of that idea. Death is scary, so our characters attempt to defeat death. And sure, most of them die, but two, Maddox and Trent, do not. They swim under the water through the coral and are able to escape the beach. And also, not to nitpick, not unlike my podcast, Mostly Nitpicking, do I think this movie is going for a Christian baptism will save you message? Not really, but it does do that, and that's something M. Night movies do a lot. In his first outing as the Overseer, David is thrown into a pool and nearly drowns until he is saved at the last minute by a child. After all the water dunking, David is able to beat the killer and save the kids. Signs ends with Merrill using a baseball bat to break glasses filled with water, which we learn is toxic to the alien. Aang's waterbending defeats the Fire Kingdom. And I'm going to take a wild guess and say that something significant happens involving water at the climax of Lady in the Water, which I saw once when it came out and refused to watch again. But Maddox and Trent use the water to cheat death and bring justice to the evil resort/pharmaceutical company that sent them to the beach. So I'd say that ties up the theme. Death is scary, but like everything, not as strong as the power of family, and it can be defeated. But then what is Sandcastle about? The themes are certainly similar to Old. It's about characters fearing aging and death and the importance of family. But what's really interesting is the conclusion both stories reach. Old thinks aging and death should be avoided. Sandcastle disagrees. In fact, I would say the central message of Sandcastle is that life is life no matter how long it lasts, and every second you spend trying to prolong it is when you don't spend living it. In Old, the beach is a very clear metaphor for the inevitability of death, and that's true of Sandcastle as well. The beach is death, one not even magic coral can protect you from. But in Sandcastle, the beach is also life. The characters that accept that, mostly the kids, live lives that are short but filled with happiness. They share intimate moments with partners. They have a party, and they play. They go to sleep content. The parents, on the other hand, obsess over their looks, risk their lives trying to escape, and waste their time. Charles, who is the most affected by the prospect of his passing, chooses to use his time to build a sandcastle. Even when his wife is lonely and afraid, Charles won't stop building because he believes he needs to leave a mark on the world. But a sandcastle is a contradiction. A castle, a stronghold protecting the highborn, impregnable, timeless, and yet one made of a material that washes away with the first hint of a tide. A material so fine that it's used as a fluid to count down hours. The castle becomes a fortress made of tissue paper. But because Charles believes his life's value is summed up by the works he builds, that will exist long after he's gone and therefore extend his existence, he can't help but shape his castle even if it's doomed to decay before he does. Like the monument to Ramses II in Shelley's famous poem Ozymandias, Charles' sandcastle is bound to disappear. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. The story told by Amazon makes it clear to anyone who still has not caught on. Any time spent avoiding death is time wasted. No one is owed long life, so you should spend your time with family or exploring the world or doing something worthwhile. But in Old, they don't. Once the families realize what the beach is doing, no character accepts it. They all either panic or try to escape. And the deviations from the source material guarantee they will have nothing to celebrate. The second family, missing a son, means that Maddox doesn't have a partner. Mid-sized sedan, dying early means he can't teach the kids lesson. Kara's baby, whose birth in the book leads to a moment of celebration, in the movie immediately dies, throwing Kara into a depression that ultimately kills her. The narrative is created to give our main characters nothing to live for beyond escape. It's a tragedy, and near the very end, you sort of think the movie learned its lesson, as the adult Maddox and Trent start their last day, alone on the beach. Trent suggests they build a sandcastle, have some fun before they hit old age. And just as they're about to engage with the central metaphor, Trent remembers that he has a secret code which the siblings use to escape the beach. So how did we get here? I've got a few theories. Number 1, Night wanted a twist ending. So this was my first thought when I started planning this out. There's one thing we know about M. Night Shyamalan, it's that he loves twist endings. And he has crafted some of the most iconic ones in film history. Bruce Willis was dead the whole time, Glass is the bad guy, Split takes place in the Unbreakable verse. So it's no surprise that Night would add some extra setup and payoff to Sandcastle, one that invented a villain and a clear scheme. After all, the book isn't really concerned with how or why any of this is happening, it just is. But Night loves a twist, so he wrote one. But the movie doesn't really work if you just end it with the resort manager saying they cured seizures. You need something else, and taking Maddox and Trent off the beach and putting them back in the resort gives the twist plotline closure. That makes sense to me, but I think there's more. Number 2, Old and Sandcastle are in fundamentally incompatible genres. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, Old is a horror movie, and I wouldn't say Sandcastle is a horror book. at least not exclusively. Sure, the situation is terrifying, but it is not only terrifying. It has a fair amount of humor, and it's not trying to scare you, it's trying to make you think about life. So is the idea of adapting Sandcastle as a horror movie just fundamentally doomed? Would you want someone like Michel Gondry or Darren Aronofsky to take this allegory and give it a more ambiguous, dreamlike tone? Maybe. I definitely think that's part of it, but I think there is one more significant factor here. Number 3, Knight wanted a more uplifting ending. The Sandcastle ending is a downer. Everyone dies. Did Old end the way it did because Knight wanted an ending that was closer in tone to his usual ending? Because frequently, the M. Night Shyamalan movie ends with a bittersweet victory. Everyone died in the happening, but Mark Wahlberg and Zooey Deschanel saved their marriage. Kevin killed 2 of the girls and is on the loose, but Anya Taylor-Joy survived. The Black Clover Society killed most of the main characters in Glass, but their families released the footage that proved they were superhuman. Kind of, I mean, not to nitpick again, not unlike my podcast Mostly Nitpicking, but no one would buy that. Even before AI, you'd see that footage and think, oh, it's an ad for some sort of found footage movie or a YouTube channel or something. This would fool no one, let alone everyone in the 30th Street subway station. But anyway, that's what I would call your traditional M. Night ending. So it sort of makes sense that Old would have one too, a bittersweet victory. Almost everyone on the beach dies, but the kids survive and get justice for their families and all of the other families that died on the beach as part of the experiments. But in my opinion, Sandcastle has the actual happier ending. Nearly everyone that died makes peace with their fate and enjoys themselves. The couples and families all die together, and they lived a life, albeit a short one. Sure, Old has more survivors, but I would argue it has a sadder ending. Maddox and Trent watched these families panic and suffer. They saw 3 people die in some pretty horrific ways. But I think there's another dynamic in play that guarantees Old would end with survivors, even if it undermined everything Sandcastle was trying to say. Old was a COVID movie. Now yes, obviously Sandcastle was written long before COVID. It was first published in 2010, and M. Night apparently first learned of Sandcastle when he got the book as a Father's Day present in 2017. And while no one knew what they were at the time in 2019, Universal announced they were going to distribute 2 films by M. Night, one of which we would learn was Old. So this movie existed, at least conceptually, before 2020. But it was not until May of 2020 that production seemed to start rolling, with June bringing the first round of casting announcements. And even if that wasn't what the film was originally going to be about, how could you not then see this movie through the COVID lens? Old is the story of a group of people who are isolated from society and forced to deal with some health emergency that no one understands, not even the doctors. And as the health emergency takes its toll, the quarantine also gets to them. They turn on each other, on themselves. Everyone feels like time flew by. The kids were forced to grow up too quickly. And I'm not even going to get into the fact that in Old, the whole situation is managed by an evil pharmaceutical company. Not saying that I think M. Night is anti-vax or anything, just like, how can you not see this movie as the story of a bunch of families dealing with the pandemic and lockdown? And if that's the case, and the movie unintentionally becomes a COVID allegory, how can you kill everyone? In the abstract, sure, life is precious, we need to be present. That's what Sandcastle is saying, but when you map the metaphor to a specific disease, everything gets way more complicated. And there's a world where another filmmaker could take Sandcastle during the height of the COVID pandemic and create a movie where everyone still dies, but I just don't think M. Night is that kind of writer-director. As dark as they are, his movies tend to have hopeful endings. And in a movie where the beach represents the inevitability of death, accepting that and living in the moment is hopeful. But in one where the beach is a specific disease that at the time of filming is ripping its way through the population, accepting that is not hopeful. Everyone dies eventually, but not everyone dies from COVID. At least we hope so. Someone has to survive. And I've seen plenty of interviews with Knight and the rest of the cast about what they think Old represents. They get the lesson of Sandcastle. Live in the moment, value family, be present. And I think in a world where COVID never happened, Maddox and Trent make that Sandcastle on their last day together and happily pass. That vision could even still have the pharmaceutical twist revealed at the end, just not Maddox and Trent escaping. I think what we get is the compromise. When Maddox and Trent finally accept their fate and have fun, they get the tools to escape. They're rewarded for learning the lesson of the movie. But I still think that breaks what I and Sandcastle believe should be the one rule of this story. Nobody leaves the beach. Because in my mind, that completely undermines everything that makes the original graphic novel special. Speaking of media about aging faster than you want and the difficulty of coming to terms with that reality, Lindsay Ellis made a new video essay called Bluey Adults about why Bluey hit so hard with so many people outside of what you would imagine is Bluey's demo. And as someone who knows pretty much nothing about Bluey, like at the level where I assumed that this was Bluey, but apparently it's not, I found this video fascinating. Lindsay talks about the current landscape of kids' TV, why Bluey is unique, and the fandom that it has sort of unintentionally created. And you can watch that video of Lindsay's and many others exclusively on Nebula, which we just introduced 3-day trials for Nebula. You're like, what's Nebula? Well, it's a subscription streaming service that I helped to create. I've talked about this many times in many videos before, where me and a bunch of other YouTube creators, people that make videos about like history, culture, current events, science, all kinds of stuff. It's a very big list of what we make videos about. But Nebula is a platform you can go to watch all our videos early, ad-free. You can like download them on your phone, and there's even original Nebula content like Patrick Williams' new short film, The Dinner Plan, which if you're watching this video the week it was released, The Dinner Plan will be on Nebula very soon after that, and also all kinds of other cool Nebula stuff like the thing that I worked on, which we'll talk about in the future, which is very cool. But like Nebula is curated. I don't know if you guys use YouTube a lot. I do for all kinds of stuff. And it has so much AI. And some of it's like obvious AI, right? Like a movie trailer for Avengers Doomsday, and it's all the characters just kind of turning. But there's also AI content where it is a disembodied voice talking about a news thing or character in a comic book or something. A lot of times I'll be like, what is the deal with this vigilante character? I would like to learn a little bit more about him pretty quickly, so I'll put on a YouTube video. And if I did this 3 years ago, it's like people who know what they're talking about, who are fans of the character, research the character, whatever, and they're like human beings. And I love that. Do it now. Unless you see the person's face or you know who they are, it could very well, and a lot of them are just like AI videos where the AI talks about the characters. It drives me up a wall because you don't always know it until like you're a little bit in and you're like, oh man, something about the way this guy's talking just doesn't feel right. But sometimes they just do sound right, and it's not until like you're pretty much done with the video that you're like, damn it, that wasn't a real person. And like Nebula's got a lot of great things going for it, but one main one that I love to tell people about is it's all real people. We are making it ourselves, and all the videos getting made on it are made by us, and it's very cool. And a yearly subscription to Nebula is $60. That is $5 a month. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/NandoVMovies, you can get a year of Nebula for just $36. That is $3 a month. We also have our Nebula lifetime memberships, which you pay $500 once and you can use Nebula for the rest of your life. And if you use my link, you can get it for $300 instead of $500. And also, the holidays are coming up. Nebula is a great gift. Like, sure, you could get someone a shirt they might wear a couple times, but for $36, you could give them a year subscription to Nebula. It supports the channels they love, and they get to watch all of our videos ad-free, which watching videos without ads is the greatest gift of all. It is an incredible deal, a great way to spend $3 a month, and if you're not sure about it, like I said, go check out the trial, check out some of our original stuff, watch some of my videos early as they go up, see if you love Nebula. I have a feeling you will, and hopefully I'll see you over there soon. As always, thank you to everybody who continues to support the channel on Patreon. Thank you to everybody who listens to my podcast, Mostly Nitpicking, and everybody that follows me on social media. I'm Nando V Movies everywhere. That's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.